Hello, and it's an honor to take on this heavy burden. Welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I'm joined as always by my former Jedi turned co-host, Andrew Williams. How are we doing today, Andrew?
Fine.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, Andrew. Our month continues. We're going to get to this one fairly quickly because when we talk about this franchise, we tend to talk a lot. It's hard not to. But before we dive into it, I do want to acknowledge that over on our Discord, we announced our theme for the month, and some people had some things to say. As always, you can write in on our Discord with your positive thoughts about movies we're covering. We will read it on the episode. When we announced the movies we were covering, we had already recorded last week's episode, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, but some people chimed in with their positive thoughts on that movie, like Groffles, who says, Mark Strong Award, Liam Neeson. It's hard to pick, but overall, he carries the movie. As a father figure, mentor, and morale center around changing the dogmatic zealotry of the Jedi, it's too hard for me to pick someone else. 3 things I'd like to focus on, which I think this movie did well. The introduction of pod racing to the franchise is awesome, and the extended race sequence is so much fun. It's full of action, excitement, and grants power and agency to Anakin. I absolutely think it holds up as a fun, high-stakes plot point, putting aside the ethics of gambling on slave ownership. Yes, that small thing. The introduction of Senator Palpatine is great. I like Ian McDiarmid's acting, and while his hidden villainy gets expanded upon, I enjoy the character's arc starting to be established in this movie. Lastly, I cannot overstate how important it is. Duel of the Fates is the single greatest Star Wars song, and it is highly ranked for all movie soundtracks for me as well. The entire sequence in the film of the Jedi versus Sith lightsaber battle, having 2 Jedi fight 1 Sith with a double-bladed weapon, is badass enough, but to add on this song, it is unforgettable. I think it may be my favorite moment in all of Star Wars films, so you can put it down as my favorite extended scene since it's like 20 minutes of the movie cut between all the other ending sequences. And then they was listening to Duel of the Fates while writing this, and I saw this on Spotify, and they included a screenshot. And you know the little bar across the bottom of a video or song that shows you the progress? It's a lightsaber. It's like a lit lightsaber with this show. I don't know if it does that for all Star Wars songs on Spotify, but that's a fun Easter egg. Look, no surprises here. We talked about this movie last week. Pod racing, Duel of the Fates, double lightsaber, Liam Neeson. I mean, the high points of that movie seem to be pretty universal from the feedback that I've seen.
Yeah.
Toby also writes in with their positive thoughts, and they say, I have a lot of love for Phantom Menace. The pod racing is one of the best scenes in the franchise. Also loved the N64 game where you could use both controllers as throttles. Full stop. I did not know this for a long time. I never knew this as a kid. Andrew, did you know you can plug in 2 N64 controllers and use them as the left and right throttle of the pod racer?
No idea.
I'm doing this now. I've heard this before, but this reminded me. I've never actually tried it, but as I said last week, I have this game downstairs. I have 2 controllers. That sounds like a blast. I gotta try it out. Will report back. Toby continues, and I like that it has no music, and most of it is just listening to those engines. Another one of the best scenes is the fight between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul at the end where Duel of the Fates is playing, which in my opinion is the best music John Williams has made. Not to downplay anything else he's made, though, because he's one of the best. It's hard to choose a Mark Strong because I like both Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson and Ian McDiarmid. He's great too, but I think he's his best in the second and third movies. So I'll go with Neeson for Phantom Menace. Another vote for Liam Neeson as a Mark Strong Award, and more just crazy high praise for Duel of the Fates. Andrew, you talked a lot about Duel of the Fates last week. Do you consider it the best Star Wars song, in your opinion?
No.
But do you think that's a hot take or crazy take?
I think it's... I don't know that it's a hot take. I think it's like like the main theme is like one of the most iconic themes of all time. Like saying that the Duel of the Fates is better than that, I think could be considered a slightly hot take. More like that kind of take where you grab it and you're not expecting it to be warm and it doesn't burn your hand, but you're still like, oh.
Honestly,
like
though,
maybe a little like that. I get it though. Like I'm not gonna say he's crazy for it, but I've never heard somebody say that before.
So you put main theme as number one if you were to rank Star Wars themes.
Yeah, main theme, the Imperial March is up there. Like Darth Vader's
Imperial
theme,
March is number one for me. That is the most synonymous with Star Wars, the most recognizable. It's if I'm gonna hum a Star Wars theme, it's the Imperial March. I love all the teases throughout the prequel trilogy too, and the build up to that. But I think it's definitely those three. I mean,
yeah, and that's why I've told people that like if it's one thing where I do think we're not talking, this is a hashtag PP conversation, but like. The sequels versus the prequels, everybody has their takes on them. I think the music, especially in episode 1, is probably, to me, I don't think it's a hot take at all to say it's the best of all the media from Star Wars that came after the original trilogy. Like, I think that the episode 1 music from Duel of the Fates, that parade sequence, that parade music, I think that's really, really good too. Obviously, it's reusing a lot of the same cues. The loss of the 20th Century Fox overture, because for the longest time, that was one of the things that I associated with Star Wars, is that it was that 20th Century Fox overture into the Star Wars theme. That was like Star Wars.
You're talking about for the sequels?
Yeah, the sequels don't have that, obviously, because it's Disney now. But even just that overture into the original theme is just so synonymous with Star Wars for me. But yeah, I would say Duel of the Fates is top 3, for sure. I would say that behind the main theme and the Imperial March, it's got to be, at this point, probably the most synonymous song with Star Wars.
Andrew, how are you watching the prequels for this month? What are you watching them
on? I'm actually doing an experimental method where I rewatch the memories in my brain of them. No, I've been watching them. I bought them digitally. I've been watching them that way.
Fandango, Voodoo.
Yeah,
whatever it's called. Same. I was just curious. Obviously, they're on Disney Plus. I'm curious if they keep the 20th Century Fox opening on Disney Plus, or if they replace it with Disney or something. Because, like, when you watch old Pixar, they have the most current Disney opening. They don't use the opening that it originally released with, which is quite frustrating. Because, like you're saying, like, that's part of the experience. When you watch movies like on home video growing up, the opening titles and production studios are part of the experience. So to mess with that it's odd at the very least.
Yeah, it's odd because I would have thought the movie top to bottom is copyrighted as it exists. I don't know. That seems odd.
I mean, was Disney going to sue itself for updating their Disney logo?
I guess. I don't know. It's a good question. I've asked someone who watches things on Disney Plus. We'll see if he returns with an answer before the end of the show.
Okay, if not, maybe I'll watch episode 3 on Disney Plus, and I can also report back. But not to get too ahead of ourselves here. Let's talk about what we're doing here, Andrew. We're not talking about episode 1 any longer, because each week we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It is Star Wars prequel month, and this week we are talking the 2002 film Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Andrew, what's your history with this movie? Is it I'm going to ask you that every week, but I imagine it's going to be like the same answer over and over again for episodes 1, 2, and 3.
What's my history with episode 2?
Yes.
It's a complicated history. A lot of ins, a lot of out. No, it's not. I'm sure I saw it in theaters multiple times. I don't have nearly as many vivid memories of watching this in theaters as I did with episode 1. And
this is your dad taking you and your brother to theaters again and again.
When was this? The 2002. So I was 15, about to be 15. So I probably didn't see it 5 times in theaters, but I definitely saw it in theaters. The memories of this one are much more faded. I don't have as kind of iconic a memory as seeing this as I did with episode 1. But definitely saw it. Have rewatched it occasionally over the years. Did the Machete Order myself probably 8 years ago or so. Did it all in one weekend. But we did it all. So we did 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6. That was before 7 existed, so must have been a while ago. But it was fun. So I go back to it occasionally. Some cool bits. But yeah, not something that I've gotten. Not something I'm nearly as familiar with as my experiences watching episode 1.
Pretty similar for me. I definitely remember watching episode 1 like in theaters and when it came out, and I think I watched it multiple times back then. Episode 2, I know I saw back then, but I don't really remember if I saw it in theaters, if I saw it on home video. I know I saw it back in the day. Never revisited it until I did my own Machete rewatch, where I did cut episode 1. We discussed this last week. And I think I did that leading up to or shortly after The Force Awakens. So when was that? 2016? Is that when that came out?
Yes.
8 years ago?
15?
Wow.
Was it 15?
2015? It's been a while.
Yeah, 2015.
So that's the last time I watched episode 2.
December 2015, yeah.
And, yeah, haven't rewatched it until this week. And for whatever reason, maybe because I never rewatched episode 1 when I did the Machete Order, this movie, the look of this movie, the feel of this movie has defined the entire prequel trilogy for me in my brain for a long time. And rewatching these movies one by one, I'm kind of rewiring my brain that they don't all look the same. They don't all have digital sets. They don't all have this digital camera look and feel to them, but I feel it the strongest with this movie. And it's perhaps unfair for me to apply that feeling to all 3 movies, because as I'm seeing, that was not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. No notes.
Hashtag PP. We'll probably come back around to that. But first, we gotta set the stage here. This movie's released May 16th, 2002. It's made on a budget of $115 million at the box office. Andrew, it only brought in $645.2 million. Can you believe it? It's obviously a lot of money, but
terrible.
Below episode 1 and below expectations. Critically, it probably gets the harshest reception of the series so far. Holds a 65% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, eking by on that positive critic score. Audience scores down to 56%. Obviously, a lot more retrospective reviews included on the audience side, but it's dividing critics. We talked about the harsh reception of episode 1 last week. I think that comes down even harder on episode 2 here.
I would agree. That like I said, that audience score sits at a 56%, so pretty straight down the middle. This is a 65% off 256 reviews for the critics, so quite a big pool for our response here, and it's pretty middling. And I do not believe there has been some reconsideration of the prequels. There has been some reconsideration of some of the aspects of them. People like Hayden Christensen, who we'll talk about a little bit more throughout the podcast. His presence here, it becomes a major sticking point. Not at all expected from Star Wars fans. They're usually so respectful of cast members. But
back in the prequel trilogy, they were pretty harsh, but they've learned their lessons since then, and future Star Wars movies would not have an issue of fans
there's definitely no way they'd bully
cast members.
Are you kidding me? There's definitely no way they'd bully a child into stop acting because he didn't look cool enough as Anakin Skywalker. That's not a thing that fans would do. Anyway, there's been some reevaluation. Hayden's gotten to return to the franchise in the ensuing years, and I think that's led to some joy amongst the fandom at getting to see him kind of bring it full circle. But at the time, and even I would say the large general response to this is pretty meh overall.
Looking at the creative team, this movie is written by George Lucas and Jonathan Hales. We talked a lot last week about how episode 1, more than any other Star Wars movie to that point, was the most George Lucas thing to ever George Lucas. It's the most creative control he ever had on any singular film. Jonathan Hales, with the writing credit here, is the only time in these 3 movies that anyone else is credited with a writing credit or director credit or any creative credit. Now, by all accounts, George Lucas had the movie written story-wise. Jonathan Hales comes in fairly late in that process and is mainly helping him shape it and punch it up, which they continue to do right up until production starting. Jonathan Hales is already in the George Lucas stratosphere. He notably worked on the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles about a decade before this movie comes out, so already familiar with George Lucas, and it seems to be the way he was brought in. Because otherwise, not a lot of movie credits. Doesn't have any theatrical credits after this movie, and even it's pretty spotty before this, but notably has a story credit on The Scorpion King, which was a hit a few years prior, but otherwise is doing mostly work in TV and even on stage.
Yeah, a whole lot of very odd things in here. Did oddly write a Agatha Christie adaptation in 1980. This has just caught my eye because I actually have watched this. It's based off a Miss Marple book and features Angela Lansbury, Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, Tony Curtis, Kim Novak. It's not a bunch of lightweights really here. It's actually quite a heavy cast of kind of powerhouse stars of the 50s and 60s. But it is a very interesting movie. Obviously, Angela Lansbury plays Miss Marple, who is just an old lady who uses her keen powers of observation to solve mysteries, which has become the basis of entire sections at bookstores now. But it is a interesting career. But like you said, of these prequel films, he's the only one kind of brought in to help out. I do think that's in part due to the aggressive production schedule. I mean, they literally, I think, developed this script. They start developing the film, I think, in March of 2000, and then I think by June there's a script. So they wrote that script really quickly, and then principal photography started in June. So the production on this movie is oddly aggressive, like extremely aggressive. So they are, like I said, tinkering with that script all the way up until they start shooting. Wouldn't be shocked if they kept working on it even after they started shooting. Not entirely sure why they had to move so aggressively, but they did.
If I had to guess, and this is purely a guess, I'm fairly certain these movies are financed in large part by George Lucas pre-selling the toy rights to the movies, basically going to the toy companies being like, hey, I'm going to make more Star Wars movies. Give me a lot of money to make them, and you can make the toys for them. I imagine a deal like that is going to come with some deadlines. Like, okay, we'll agree to that, but like, you've got to produce our movies by these target dates. Again, pure speculation. I don't expect you to have actually researched this, but that would be my best guess is why this kind of had to have the turnaround that it did.
Would shock me.
Of course, as I've mentioned, the movie is directed by George Lucas, who we've talked about extensively. We'll continue to discuss, of course, as this month goes on. But for now, Andrew, I think it's time that we dive into this movie and talk about all the positives, everything we like about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Andrew, are you ready?
Oh, yes.
After an attempt is made on Senator Padme Amidala's life, Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi and his apprentice Anakin Skywalker are assigned to protect her and uncover who was behind the assassination attempt. Reuniting after 10 years, Anakin confesses his love for Padme, and over time they fall in love, despite this being forbidden by Anakin's Jedi training. Obi-Wan discovers a planet that is building a clone army for the Republic, secretly ordered to do so by a long-deceased Jedi warrior. Meanwhile, a resistance is growing in the Galactic Republic and many planets have seceded. In response to the unrest, Chancellor Palpatine is granted emergency power over the Senate and orders the Republic to assemble an army to defend against a potential war. The leader of the defecting planets is revealed to be Count Dooku, a Jedi Master that has fallen to the dark side. When he attempts to kill Padme, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and the entire Jedi Council in battle, the Clone Army is sent to rescue them, thus beginning the Clone Wars. Then Anakin and Padme get married. The end.
Yeah.
A lot going on here. It feels like a lot going on here. A lot of secrecy and deception. But I think when you lay it all out, it's pretty straightforward, right? I don't know if the clones never really attack. It's called Attack of the Clones. They defend and rescue in the end, but they're not attacking anybody.
Yeah.
0 out of 10 stars right there. Sorry. Hashtag PP.
Clone Wars. Yeah, this is, thanks folks. We'll see you next week.
No, of course, plenty to talk about. Lots happening here. Lots more action, I would say, than episode 1. But before we get to all that, we got to talk about the cast of this film. And of course, we're going to start with the high point, best casting, best performance of the movie, because every episode we recognize one person goes so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, kick us off. Who's getting your Mark Strong Award for Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones? Andrew, after last week's rant by me about these prequel trilogies being the only one that have the word episode in the actual title, once again, I was scrolling through Vudu to find this one, and on all of the covers, which I know get updated all the time, it excludes episode 1, 2, or 3. And it just does the traditional thing where it's like a square with Star Wars, and in the middle of the square is the subtitle, to make it in line with all the other movies, which I'm torn about because I appreciate that. Like, I want them to all look of a piece, but I know it's not correct. I know I know they weren't released that way. So now they're altering a title after release, which is another thing that bothers me. So I'm torn about how to feel about this.
So you actually are really annoyed that A New Hope is not just called Star Wars on every platform?
That's another one I struggle with, because to me,
I didn't mean to reverse Uno you so hard.
Yeah, that was you got me. I think we've discussed, because like, as someone who grew up where episode 4 was always episode 4, it was always called A New Hope. The only thing that bothered me is on the VHS, it says Star Wars real big, A New Hope real small, and then you go to Empire and Jedi, and Star Wars is small, and the subtitles real big. That annoyed me. But to me, it was always A New Hope, and that feels right to me. And I always thought it was silly for people who were around when Star Wars came out to continue to call that movie simply Star Wars, because there's so many Star Wars now. But that's very hypocritical of me, because if I had seen it then, it would always be its original title to me. I'm a stickler for that. So I gotta admit that I'm a hypocrite about that. No, Andrew, I want my Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, to be called Star Wars A New Hope. But I guess I want Episode 1, 2, and 3 to have Episode 1, 2, and 3 in the title, even though that annoys me to no end because the other ones don't. I don't know. It's a mess. It's a mess, man.
Yeah. It's like Raiders of the Lost Ark was just released as Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was not Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, but all the sequels are Indiana Jones and the XYZ. So later, eventually, it got retitled to where now, if you look for it, it is Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. But if there is a guy I know who was alive when all these came out, and it annoys him to no end that the titles that he associated with them, seeing them in the theater, are not what they're given, and it drives them nuts.
I get it. If they ever get around to releasing Glass Onion on 4K, but the cover says Glass Onion, a Knives Out story, I'm going to have a hard time. I'm going to buy it, but I'm going to complain about it.
How would you just put those all alphabetically where they belong? Like,
we talking Glass Onion, Knives Out? Yes.
Yeah.
Indiana Jones? No, I think I'd put them all under Indiana Jones. Okay. Because then you have two.
So Glass Onion, Knives Out, not together. Indiana Jones together.
Yes, because even if you do a Knives Out story, it still starts with Glass Onion.
Yeah.
You know?
But they're part of the same series. So, but you
that's not a big deal for me. But Indiana Jones would bother me because
I think
Raiders,
it's not going to matter because it's going to get a trilogy box set that's just called the Knives Out trilogy, and that will annoy me.
That will drive me nuts because like a
What if it's
Benoit
called
Blanc
the Benoit
mystery is
Blanc?
right. That's cool. That's what it should be. Glass Onion, a Benoit Blanc mystery is totally cool with me. I mean, I don't think it needs a subtitle, but if you want to brand this franchise, you brand it after what's consistent in every movie, which is clearly going to be Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc. Knives Out
when
is
you really think
specifically about the family from the first movie.
When you think about it really, though, it is a bit of new territory because Daniel Craig has never been a part of a franchise where there have been installments with different titles that didn't have something linking them. So you don't want to confuse audiences by putting him in a bunch of movies that seemingly have these different disparate titles but are starring the same character. It wouldn't make any sense. They can't handle that.
I actually have a lot of...
You gonna
I
blow past
admire...
the James Bond joke there? Just running past it?
No, I'm diving into it head first right now. I admire the way the 007 movies do not force James Bond or 007 in any kind of subtitle. The movies are just called what they're called. And then, like, you know, in the marketing, they work in 007, you know, Casino Royale, the O's become the O's for 007. Like, that's totally cool with me. Now, if I were to own all of those individually, I would have to put them together. I can't just spread out 20 movies across they would all go together. But
not with that attitude, you can't.
I actually have the Daniel Craig box set released before No Time to Die, and then I have No Time to Die as a standalone steelbook. But I still keep them together.
They do have a Daniel Craig 4K that has all of them now, right?
They do, but I already have the steelbook. I'm not going to rebuy a set to get them all together.
Again, not with that attitude.
Andrew, you're asking me the tough questions, but what about you? Do Indiana Jones, if your DVD, Blu-ray, whatever copy just said Raiders of the Lost Ark, would you file it under R with the other movies? The other, 4 movies all under I? Andrew, you do care. I know you care. You can't act like on this mic that you don't care because we've had so many conversations about this. I know you care.
I would probably have them in a box set where they're just called Indiana Jones, and that's where it would go.
That's fair. Hey, you know what, Andrew?
Just like I realized that's not the nature of the question. Like I was actually looking the 4K of the Indiana. Actually, no, that's just the 4. I don't think there is an Indiana Jones collection that has all 5 yet. But
it's coming.
That's interesting. It'll be there. So yeah, definitely don't buy it, folks, because it's definitely coming later. But yeah, the only way I assume I would physically own Indiana Jones movies would be to buy a box set of all of them. In which case, it's just going to say Indiana Jones, so it would go under I. I don't have any real like. If I owned Raiders separately and the DVD I bought magically, like I would need to buy like. I don't even know if there's a DVD of Indiana Jones of Raiders of the Lost Ark that doesn't say Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark on it. Like you're probably only getting like first OG VHSs that just say Raiders of the Lost Ark, and so in that regard, I think Raiders definitely just ends up with the Indiana Jones movies.
And Star Wars, I think by the time it reaches any kind of home video, is already Chris. A New Hope. What do you got?
I am very wrong. The 4K of Raiders of the Lost Ark just says Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's kind of cool. It
does not say Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, there is a DVD that says that. There is a Blu-ray that says that. The Blu-ray also just says Raiders of the Lost Ark. That is
interesting.
Fun. I did not know that. Because I know there's definitely like Blu-rays and stuff that say... So it must have been when the 4Ks came out. When the 4Ks came out, they must have like gone back and just only called it Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is neat. But like I'm looking on Amazon, there are clearly like DVDs and Blu-rays that would say Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. So your existential crisis resumes.
Andrew, who gets your Mark Strong Award for episode 2?
Ewan McGregor, whatever. He's the lead of this film, I would say, for all intents and purposes. Maybe not. Probably meant to be Anakin and Padme. But he's taking over. It's 10 years since episode 1. He's taking over our role of kind of hardened, grizzled Jedi master. well on his way to being Alec Guinness in a scant 35 years or so. But here he's got some interesting subplots. He kind of gets he's the one that kind of cracks the mystery of this mystery planet with the clone army. He ends up being a big part of our finale, and has to kind of center this whole thing. We've got this emotional story kind of unfolding between Anakin and Padme, while Ian McGregor's kind of taking on the more headstrong, kind of action-heavy set piece as he kind of dives deep into this continued takeover of the Galactic Republic by Senator Palpatine, going further in this movie. In the last movie, he was obviously elected Supreme Chancellor, and in this movie, he is given special executive powers so that he can continue to fight this uprising that he's responsible for. But ultimately, Obi-Wan finds himself mixed up in the middle of all of that. So with that, Ian McGregor is kind of anchoring all of that extremely well. He gets to be cool, he gets to be calm, he gets to be charismatic, he gets to be all the cool stuff. So in that regard, straight to the top. McGregor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Mark Strong.
Well, most importantly, Andrew, he gets a glorious mane of hair, which does wonders for the character. Ewan McGregor also getting my Mark Strong award for this movie handily. I mean, we all praised Ewan McGregor last week, talking about episode 1. However, he did not pick up a Mark Strong award, mostly due to his role being much smaller in episode 1. You know, he's still training. He's the Padawan back then. Now he has become the mentor figure. He gets to sink his teeth into it a little bit more. And again, he gets the cool hair. He's just so effortlessly cool. And he's on his way to having that wise presence. You know, the whole reason that Liam Neeson, or one of the reasons he got our Mark Strong award last week, was just the way the man exudes that wisdom and Andrew, what does he exude in that first movie?
Gravitas.
Yeah, there it is. Ewan McGregor's on his way. The character's on his way to doing that. But he's great. I you know, we're a hashtag positivity podcast. Talking about some of these performances is gonna be a little tricky, Andrew. This movie, probably more than any other Star Wars movie, is criticized by fans and critics alike, specifically for performances. It's not really a thing that critics dial into in most Star Wars movies, but they do on this one. I think a lot of it falls on the directing, but I don't want to go down that path too much. I will just say that I think Ewan McGregor, left to his own devices, which I think a lot of these actors were, I think there was not a lot of direction given to him, is just so talented. He's able to exactly pick up on what this character is supposed to be, have the charisma to pull this off, and he just pops off the screen. I think he's, as far as our main cast, just head and shoulders above everybody, and that's not meant to be an attack on anyone else. It's just how good Ewan McGregor is.
Yep, 10 out of 10. No notes.
We have Natalie Portman returning as Padme Amidala. I talked a lot last week about how much I like this character, how headstrong they are, how smart they are, how willing they are to get their hands dirty, and that continues here. I still really like this character. I love her taking control of her own mission to keep her safe, sort of forcing Anakin into the battle because she's not going to sit by the sidelines. I love that. Now, though, what we didn't have last movie is the love story. We also have her falling in love with Anakin. We get the softer side of Padme. She's, of course, at first very headstrong and adamant that a relationship cannot form. But look at those dreamy eyes. Look at that rat tail and side braid. How can you not fall in love with it? She falls for Anakin Skywalker. So, if I had one complaint about the character last week, it was that it was all so serious in one singular tone. So I'm glad to see the character gets the stretch a little bit here. We get to see her laugh and literally roll around in the hay. And it's a welcome sort of expanding of the character, in my opinion.
Yeah, in that first movie, she's kind of like all serious. It's all business, which her planet's in danger. Makes sense. She's definitely not in danger in this film, which allows them to have a lot more fun. She's definitely not being hunted by assassins, which leads to them hanging out. But it's yeah, she's like I said, the character gets to develop. She's moved on from being the queen. She's now a senator for Naboo, which is why she doesn't have to dress like a China doll anymore. But it's but something, you know, the we'll talk about it more with scenes, but the general plot here is that they're trying to assassinate her to kind of further along their plans. Basically, they see her as a hindrance to their ability to accomplish what they want to do. And that leads to the rest of this movie unfolding. Yeah. So again, it's expansion of the character, and Portman is up to the task.
Now, Andrew, this of course brings us to Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker. The second actor to play this character so far in the prequel trilogy. And just like Jake Lloyd before him, was subject to massive fan backlash. Which I just gotta say, super sucks. Not cool. Specifically, you know, going after the actors for what I will say for what I was gonna say is going after the actors for things that aren't even their quote unquote fault. But even if it is, even if you think it's a horrible performance, don't harass somebody. Anyway, I would like to think I'm beating a dead horse, and everyone listening is in agreement that harassing people is not cool. But it's just the backlash really, I don't know if I want to say overshadows, but it's impossible to talk about this casting and performance without talking about that massive fan backlash, both about the casting, about looking at this skinny kid and being like, this is supposed to be badass Darth Vader, and then some of the lines and some of the dialogue and delivery throughout the movie gets singled out, and it's almost like it gets picked apart so much we never really talk about the performance, but that's what we're here to do now. And I think Hayden Christensen is doing a fine job of, to me, clearly what's at the forefront of his performance is the bubbling darkness and evil underneath. And we all know that's where this character's going, of course, but the fact that he lashes out at his mentor and then has to calm himself back down. He's so quick to rage, but then recognizes that he shouldn't do that, but it feels good to do that. And his rage is for just reasons, you know, like he will not allow anyone he loves to die, no matter what the cost, no matter what it takes. People being forced to do what he knows is right. You know, we've got this dictator evil bubbling up underneath, and so that torment in his brain between light and dark, and of course falling in love with Padma. He's asked to do a lot, play a lot of shades, and it's a tough place to be in. Look, it's hashtag positive podcast. I'm not here to lie to you guys. I think there's issues with this character, but it does not fall squarely on the shoulders of Hayden Christensen. There's other things you can point to, but I'll just end my little rant here by saying, if you don't like this movie, if you hate this movie, it surely isn't because of one person's performance.
No, absolutely not. I think the way we've put it in the past is Hayden Christensen is doing exactly what's asked of him. There's a lot of angst to this character, which I think gets lost. It gets kind of lost that this kid's 19 years old and has spent the last 10 years being essentially raised in the Jedi Order, which is something that has been established to have flaws in its system. So the fact that he's not necessarily developed in a completely healthy way makes sense. And I've seen people extrapolate this justification into the performance as a whole, that he's emotionally stunted. He's, you know, just there's a whole lot of things going on with this character, and he's dealing with none of these issues in a healthy way, which leads to this. I'm not necessarily going to go as far as to say that, but I do think the angst of the character is a deliberate choice, where, you know, the kind of the emotional torment he kind of finds himself in as a teenager, I think, is something he struggles to deal with. And I think Hayden is bringing that to the forefront. The anger he feels, the betrayal he feels at certain things, that's all building into his resentment to the Jedi Order, his attachment to other things, and will eventually build into... You got to wonder where it's going. All this resentment and all this anger, you know, I worry about the kid's future. What's going to happen to him? But because, you know, we don't know. We have no idea what happens to this guy. So but he's clearly, the whole point of this is to start, because at the end of episode 1, like, he's still just a kid. Like, so this movie's got to do a lot of heavy lifting with this character to get him to the point that we start to see the path. And so we create these emotional attachments.
Hints at darkness or evil in episode 1, right?
None. Like, because he's a kid. He's a kid. He doesn't even know what the Force is. Like, so you got to do a lot of work here, which is why, like, stuff like the Machete Order largely ignores episode 1, because the only real piece of information that you necessarily, quote unquote, need to glean from episode 1 is that Anakin ends up with the Jedi, which you can gather from episode 2. Now, I do think there's some stuff with the Senate and Palpatine and all of that gets lost if you don't watch episode 1. You do figure out a lot of it here, but I think the admin side of Star Wars episode 1 has some important information that does matter here. But yeah, so Hayden's got to start that path to the dark side, and I think he does a good job at starting to bring all that here. Obviously, he forms this emotional bond to Padme. He loses his mother, so we're starting to see him face loss. The whole thing with Jedi is you're not supposed to get attached. No attachments. But he has attachments. He has his mother. He can't not miss his mother. So he's seen people he loves pass. There's nothing he could do about it. So we're seeing that. We're obviously seeing the pieces being put in place for Palpatine / Sidious to be able to manipulate him and ultimately take him to what I can assume is only a very dark place. So we will find out more on the future of this character next week, I assume. But right here, I think he's got a lot of stuff. There's a lot of plates in the air that he's got to keep spinning at this performance, and I think he's doing what's asked of him in regards to all of that.
Ian McDiarmid returns as Palpatine, and we know this guy. He's Darth Sidious.
He's a bad man.
He gets to sink his teeth more into the evilness here. Obviously, during that first movie, it's all about the facade. It's all about him as Senator Palpatine. Whereas here, we actually get the first shot of him with the iconic hood over his head, and you can just see, like, the tip of his nose and his mouth. He also just looks eviler. He looks paler.
There's a much different demeanor at play here. Like, he's acting very like in the first movie, like, you know, the end of that first movie, I remember where they're at the parade and he looks at Anakin and he's like, "We will watch your career with great interest." Like, he's very, you know, just doing the politician talk, like doing the very, like, I'm trying to appeal to the people, you know, wave at the crowd, kiss some babies, all that stuff. Here, like, there's definitely, like, a much more grave undertone, and part of that is being portrayed as, like, this issue with the separatist movement that is causing these issues for the Republic. But there's just this much more serious, like you said, almost sinister undertone to the character now, because the plan that he's been executing, I mean, this is a long gestating plan, guys. This is 10 plus years. So it's finally kind of getting to the point where it's getting to the end game, and you can tell that it's just taken its toll on him.
Samuel L. Jackson returns as Mace Windu, but I don't think we spent much time talking about him. Maybe mentioned him in passing during last week's episode, because he really doesn't do much in episode 1, other than you see that he's on the Jedi Council. He's sitting on their little round chairs. Here, much more expanded role, much more screen time, much more dialogue, and of course, you get to see that beautiful purple lightsaber. Andrew, have you seen that footage from on set of him talking to George Lucas? Like, they recorded the moment that this lightsaber became a thing. He's talking to him, it's George Lucas, about lightsabers, and Lucas explains, like, well, the good guys have green and blue lightsabers, the bad guys have red. And he literally asked him, like, what about a purple lightsaber? And George, like, thinks, he goes, oh, I'll see what I can do. And it's like the moment that he pushed for a purple lightsaber, and of course, George Lucas, you're not going to say no to Samuel Jackson, and he gets to be, like, to my knowledge, the one Jedi with a purple lightsaber. Don't know if they've reused this idea, but so cool that he gets a signature color. You know, normally, like, lightsabers get signature, hilts and shapes, but signature color. He gets a purple lightsaber because Samuel Jackson's favorite color is purple, and he works it into a lot of his roles. Super cool, and I like the performance here. I mean, it's just, we've certainly talked about Samuel Jackson before. Maybe he's picked up a Mark Strong award. Who the heck knows? But the dude is just a consummate professional. I don't know if I've ever had a single complaint about any of his performances. He just shows up and gets S done.
He does. He's basically like, so it's interesting because in the first movie he's just kind of there. He's not doing a whole lot. In this movie, he very much gets to get in on the action. He gets to get in some fights. Is the one responsible for killing Jango Fett. Cuts his head clean off. I don't know that you can do anything unclean with a lightsaber.
Never any blood spurts, which is great for a PG-13 franchise.
Great for it. It's because it cauterizes the wound as it goes through, man.
Makes sense.
That's why you can't cut a turkey with it. It's
wait, what?
Sorry, that's an episode of How I Met Your Mother where Marshall keeps talking about how he wants a lightsaber to carve the Thanksgiving turkey with, which wouldn't work, folks. But anyway, yeah. It's very cool that he's got the purple lightsaber. He is the only one, to my knowledge, that has one. They have done some weird colors over time. He's certainly the only one on screen to ever have a purple lightsaber, as far as I know. I think Ahsoka has white lightsabers. Some of the lightsabers in that first movie, too, also come off looking a little white instead of blue. Blue and green are kind of the notorious Jedi colors. I know Rey has a yellow lightsaber now. There was also a video game where someone had a yellow lightsaber. I don't remember which one it was. One of the Dark Forces ones, I think. Somebody in the Discord will correct me, I'm sure. Kyle Katarn, maybe that was the character's name. Got it from somebody. I don't remember. But anyway, purple stands out. It's super cool, super iconic. Yeah, and it's awesome that it was just like a off-the-cuff conversation that led to it happening. And now it's people, it's one of those things where, like, if they announced today that they were going to do a Mace Windu thing and Samuel L. Jackson was coming back to the role, I would be like, okay. I don't care that it's been 20 years. He looks exactly the same. Do it.
Christopher Lee plays Count Dooku, also known as Darth Tyrannus. What a cool character. What a cool...
Excuse you, Sir Christopher Lee.
Excuse me, and the Wikipedia page I'm reading from. Sir Christopher Lee. Talk about presence. Such little screen time. I think before we record, we're kind of talking about how little Christopher Lee is on screen or in this movie, but he looms over it so large because he's just got, again, that presence. To me, this is very indicative of George Lucas wearing his influences on his sleeve shamelessly, which is something he has really always done. For as groundbreaking as Star Wars is, the influence leading up to that first series of movies is very apparent, very heavily felt, from the opening scrawl to lightsabers. I mean, it's a samurai film in space. Many people said, and when it was pointed out to me that Darth Vader's helmet is just a samurai helmet, I could never unsee it. I'm like, yes, it's so obvious. That's exactly what that shape is. It's a samurai helmet. What I'm getting at is Christopher Lee is a legend of the screen in a very film junkie, film student kind of way. Like, film guys are going to love Christopher Lee. And I've got to imagine the name Count Dooku was a nod to his role in the Hammer films, where I believe he plays Count Dracula, and he gets to wear this beautiful cloak in this movie here. So I think it's just obvious that George Lucas really admired this guy's work and just was dying for a chance to write him in and write this character for him.
I also believe that Lord of the Rings, he probably shot Lord of the Rings, but it hadn't come out yet. So he was kind of bubbling up in his resurgence there. But Christopher Lee is one of the coolest people that's ever lived. He's awesome. He played Dracula 7 times through the Hammer horror stuff. His version of the original Dracula, which I think is called The Horror of Dracula, in some versions, is fantastic. Obviously, Bela Lugosi's Dracula, even the Spanish language Dracula they shot at the same time, are both fantastic. But I think Christopher Lee's Dracula is also great. He also played Frankenstein at least once in those same Hammer horror films. Obviously got Lord of the Rings. He's got Star Wars. Showed up in a lot of the Tim Burton films there for a while. I think he was Sleepy Hollow, Corpse Bride, Chocolate Factory, a couple of others. He's in the original Wicker Man. He's just been in he's in Gremlins too for some reason. But there's pretty much nothing that this man hasn't done. He had a very long military service before he got into acting, so much so that supposedly when some director, and maybe Peter Jackson, was trying to describe to him what it would feel like to be stabbed, Christopher Lee said, "I don't have to imagine what it's like to be stabbed," which is probably the most hardcore thing you could say to a film director, to get them to never speak to you again and be like, all right, I clearly can't compete at all with the life that you've lived. And even towards the end of his life, decided to start recording albums with heavy metal bands. He worked with, I think, Rhapsody of Fire and Man of War, and then eventually released 2 heavy metal albums of his own about Charlemagne, who you guys don't know, the first Holy Roman Emperor, but Lee is able to trace his ancestry back to Charlemagne, so it was kind of personal for him to record an album about 2 albums about Charlemagne. But you look through his filmography, I mean, you're looking at just dozens of films throughout history. I mean, he would make 10, 12 films in a year back in the days. He would do all sorts of stuff. And then obviously as things wound down, he was a villain in one of the Roger Moore James Bond films. He's done just about everything you can possibly do. It is amazing. And to have him here is awesome. He passed away in 2015, and leaves behind a body of work that speaks for itself. I mean, tons of films alongside Peter Cushing, films with Vincent Price as well. He's just done a little everything, and they just announced that they're going to be using archival recordings of him as Saruman for a Lord of the Rings movie that's coming out. I don't know how I feel about that, but it's not AI, at least. It's just old stuff they didn't use from before. But so still making movies, which is impressive for being dead. So but here as Count Dooku, he gets to be awesome. He gets to be cool. He gets to be the new Sith apprentice. In this case, a former Jedi. They established that Yoda, I believe, was his master, and then he may have even been Qui-Gon Jinn's master, because he actually believed that Qui-Gon would have sided with him in this conflict they're in. But overall, it's a small performance, not a whole lot of screen time, but certainly memorable. Gets a cool shaped lightsaber. Doesn't have a cool color, but he has this weird, like, curved hilt. I guess that's more ergonomic for his old age.
It's so
but
eloquent. It's like a gentleman's lightsaber.
Yeah, like it's exactly what I was thinking. Like, this is like if Dracula had a lightsaber, it would look like this. But it's cool. I remember seeing the toys of it when it had that weird curved hilt, which made getting batteries in it really difficult. But it was it's cool. It's another way to stand out, and I imagine this is going to be a character that's going to be around for a really long time. And they're definitely not going to kill him in the first 10 minutes of the next movie.
Temuera Morrison plays Jango Fett. Look, role of a lifetime. You get to be someone who was cloned, and by nature
I hope
of
this dude
story,
got paid. I just hope this guy got paid.
I'm sure he's doing just fine, because it sort of retroactively makes him Boba Fett. So far as they add his dialogue to a re-release of Empire Strikes Back, and of course with all the Disney Plus series, Boba is played by Temuera, because he plays Jango, who's Boba's dad, who everyone was cloned after. So many characters. If they are getting reprised or voiced, he gets to be the person to step into that role. I'm sure he's getting paid very handsomely. This is definitely a casting that fans have rallied around. You know, we talk about when Disney took over Star Wars, people were chomping at the bit for certain characters to return. This is certainly one of them, and I think he's rad as hell. I mean, I've always loved Boba Fett. Definitely, as a kid watching the original trilogy, like, that was my favorite, or one of my favorite characters. And to me, he's like the first one who, in the Star Wars movies, has a small, like, he's literally like a background character. Is it A New Hope he first shows up in? I might get that wrong, but he shows up as no dialogue, just a guy in a cool suit in the background, I think in episode 4. And then they release him as a toy, because they're trying to get as much merchandise money out of this. Like, who appeared on screen? Who has a cool look? Make them a toy. And he had a very notorious toy.
I think he's just Empire. I don't think he's in episode 4.
I think he shows up in the background with no dialogue, and you see his suit, and they made a toy that shot a rocket that got recalled because kids were like shooting their eye out. So future versions of that toy, his rocket did not eject. It was like sealed into his thing. And like his fandom grew before his big appearance in Empire. I have not researched this. This is off the top of my dome, but I think I'm right about this, Andrew.
In a 1997 special edition of A New Hope, Fett briefly appears in a reintroduced cutscene outside the Millennium Falcon. Okay, so I'm
gonna call myself half
you're
right
remembering. So in the special edition of A New Hope, he is there and he does not speak.
Okay, that must be what I'm remembering. But I know like his fandom grew in large part from like being a toy, because his presence in that original trilogy isn't that great. But I just always loved the way the character looked. He appears in some video games that I liked, and he's just badass. I mean, he's a bounty hunter. I'm a big fan of Samus Aran. This is another bounty hunter in space with a cool suit. It's a winning formula, Andrew. So by extension, I'm gonna like Jango Fett. He's also got a badass suit. He gets like Batman-like gauntlets on his forearms. It's awesome. Super cool character. Love it.
And you know, Tamora, a veteran of the show, an alum of the show, you might say. All the way back on episode 1 of our show, not episode 1 last week.
Wait a minute, who's he? Green Lantern. Who does he play?
He plays Abin Sur. He plays the guy who gives Hal Jordan the ring.
Did we even talk about him?
I would hope so.
Yeah, but, me too. Although we were just talking about this the other day. Episode 1 of our podcast, 48 minutes long. I don't know what we talked about.
48 minutes long. My God.
Things have changed.
Probably mentioned briefly. Oh, yeah, this guy plays Boba Fett. Moving on. Anyway, I believe he's the one that says the emerald energy of will for the first time. Maybe, or maybe that was Jeffrey Rush. I don't remember. But anyway, he is super cool. Obviously, he's been factored into all of these Star Wars stories they're doing now. Obviously, Mandalorian, he shows up as Boba Fett. He's got stuff as the Clone Troopers. He shows up in the Kenobi. He plays the... See, that's the best part. Like, anytime you want to bring in a Clone Trooper for anything, this guy gets the call. Like,
it's great.
It's the sweetest gig ever. Like, it really is. Like, because in Boba Fett, he gets to play Boba Fett. In Mandalorian, he's Boba Fett. But there's also voices that he does for Clone Troopers when they show up in an episode. There's a veteran Clone Trooper he plays in Obi-Wan Kenobi. And Ahsoka, he plays Captain Rex, who is a character, one of the Clone Wars characters. Like, he just, anytime there's a Clone Trooper, they can just call this guy and be like, hey, come record some dialogue for us. And he's literally done a whole bunch of video games as Jango Fett, as Boba Fett, as Clone Troopers, as anything. This guy gets to basically do all of it, as this dude just gets to live in Star Wars now, and it is pretty cool for him. I don't think he's in the Bad Batch, which is I guess they all have genetic mutations, that's why they're different. But I don't know that he's in there. So other than that, but anyway, still gets to come in and out as Clone Troopers all the time. Tamora Morrison's very cool. I think he's like I said, I think the casting of him as this character is something that has largely been embraced. And he's not just was he in Green Lantern, he was also Aquaman's dad in all the Aquaman films. He's been in all sorts of different stuff. Obviously started his career in New Zealand, where he's from. But just a great veteran character actor, and this is a super cool thing that he still gets to do. Like I said, this is 20 plus years of being involved with this stuff now, so good for him.
Man, talk about people that I hope get paid. Anthony Daniels as C-3PO,
Jesus.
the only actor to appear in all 9 Star Wars movies. And of course, tons and tons of other spin-off and Star Wars related material. I never get tired of this guy. He's like an objectively like annoying droid, but something about it works, and he's charming. And he had a very brief appearance in episode 1, but in episode 2 he gets to be I almost said reunited, but united with R2-D2 for some key scenes, and we get their fun banter, even though one of the characters is just beeps and boops, but it works. It's a very strange winning formula that I never get tired of seeing. Anthony Daniels, the man.
He's everywhere. He's been playing this character. Like, you look at his filmography, it is C-3PO almost completely.
Just C-3PO's all the way down.
C-3PO's all the way down. The one break is in Solo, a Star Wars story, he gets a cameo as somebody else. Television, lots of C-3PO. Basically, if you need this dude to be C-3PO, he will come and voice C-3PO. That is basically what this is.
It's great work if you can get it, Andrew.
It really is. If I lost 100 pounds, I'm sure I could take over this role, but I can't, so I won't. Or I won't, so I can't. But yeah, just he's a little bit more fully formed here. Obviously, in the first one, he was just really kind of an exposed robot. In this one, he's got some coverings. Still not the classic gold that we associate with him, but at least looking a little bit more like we presume he should. He gets a whole bunch of gags and jokes and things like that. He gets his head accidentally attached to a droid trooper. The droid trooper's head accidentally gets attached to his. Like, we get a whole bunch of jokes there that are just C-3PO being C-3PO, and doing his thing.
Gotta acknowledge that Kenny Baker gets to play R2-D2, at least in some scenes, which is just a super cool thing to do. And Frank Oz, of course, returns as Yoda, which, Andrew, it's 2024. What can we say about Frank Oz as Yoda? It's great.
It's iconic. It's great.
Obviously, gotta lament a little bit that he's only voicing the character here, as opposed to voicing and puppeteering. This is the first movie where we get a totally CG Yoda. We discussed last week that episode 1 was originally puppet, and then replaced with CG, so he was puppeteering on set. But here he's just providing the voice, but it's an iconic voice. It's great. It's Frank Oz. Come on.
What can you say about Frank? Frank Oz is just, he's so it feels odd to say he's underrated, but I think it's more that people just don't know what Frank Oz has done. I'm repeating myself exactly what I said last week. Apologies, but I'm going to do it again. It happens. First off, the amount of Muppets and Sesame Street characters that this man is responsible for is just unbelievable. You're looking at Fozzie,
other
Miss
than
Piggy.
Jim Henson, he is the biggest influence on Sesame Street
and the Muppets, which are technically separate.
Sure.
But you're looking at Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, Sam the Eagle, Animal, Marvin Suggs, and then when it comes to like Sesame Street, you're looking at Bert, Grover, Cookie Monster. I mean, the fact that one man is responsible for Bert, Grover, Cookie Monster, Fozzie Bear, and Miss Piggy is kind of insane. And he doesn't, like you said, he doesn't just do that. He does the puppeteering for them as well. It's one of the things I love about Last Jedi is that Yoda is in that movie, and he is a puppet. I love that he's a puppet in that movie, and I love that Frank Oz came back to voice him. I also love that Frank Oz made an appearance in Knives Out as the kind of executor of the estate, where he's just kind of listening to them all be insane and ridiculous and being like, no. Like, he's the one that's like, did you just Google that? Like, it's a bit part in Knives Out, but he's absolutely wonderful in it. But he's another guy that you look at all the things that he's done. There's just these bit parts that he does too. I know that he's in like Trading Places and Spies Like Us, movies like that. I think he's very, very funny when he shows up as himself, as a character. He had a whole run where he just kept showing up in Dan Aykroyd movies as cops, basically. Like he's in Blues Brothers, Trading Places, Spies Like Us. He just keeps showing up in like Dan Aykroyd movies, but just super funny, just wonderful. And here is him back, and Yoda gets to do some different stuff here. He is all CG, but we'll be talking more about Yoda later, I'm sure.
If you're in need of a good cry ever, just watch Frank Oz at Jim Henson's memorial service, and
man,
that'll get the job done. Andrew,
yeah, it will. It'll ruin you.
Andrew, let's jump into this now. Let's talk about the scenes of this film, starting with the best scene in the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones?
I am going with our climactic lightsaber battles, I guess we'll say.
Okay.
So after everything's kind of gone to hell, Dooku regroups with the Trade Federation, takes their plans for their super weapon. Again, you got to wonder if this stuff's going to be important later. But and is basically trying to escape the planet, get away from the Jedi and the now arrived Republic Army of Clones. Republic Army of Clones would be a great name for a band. But it's this leads to a showdown where Anakin and Obi-Wan clash with Count Dooku, who to this point has largely been ceremonial. He's been kind of standing around, just doing his thing. This is the first moment where he kind of gets to engage, and it turns out this guy's really good. I love this scene because Christopher Lee, first off, is established as awesome. But like Anakin runs in like headstrong, and Dooku like just zaps him to the side immediately. Like doesn't even break a sweat, taking out Anakin initially. And then he gets into a fight with Obi-Wan. That's a good back and forth little battle, but clearly Dooku has the upper hand and eventually gives some surface level wounds to Obi-Wan that are enough to take him out of the fight. And right as it looks like he's about to finish him off, Anakin returns into the fight. And then in a rather climactic, important moment, Dooku cuts off one of his arms. Again, like Dooku just like, in the terms of wrestling, this is a squash match. Like this is Brock Lesnar versus John Cena from SummerSlam 14. Just no chance for these guys. They just get dominated by Count Dooku. I think this is a super cool way to do it because your brain tells you, because like in episode 1, the whole impressive part of Darth Maul is it's one guy versus both of them, and he's managing to survive. He takes out one of them, but then falls to the other one. This is one where it's 2-on-1, but the headstrongness of Anakin makes it just 1-on-1 several times. It's never both of them against Dooku because Anakin rushes in headstrong. So Anakin gets taken out.
Even when Anakin gets both lightsabers after Obi-Wan goes down, he gets 2 lightsabers. He briefly fights with 2 lightsabers, which is really cool, but he still doesn't stand a chance. One lightsaber gets broken, and it's still clearly Dooku in control the entire time.
Yeah, this is a aged veteran Jedi who is just really, really good at fighting with a lightsaber. Just again, it's just so cool. It's a definite thing that, like, you know, if Christopher Lee was a Jedi, I would absolutely believe that he could own me with a lightsaber in like as few moves as possible. You get some of your classic lightsaber stuff, but overall, I just like that idea that Dooku is this Jedi we've never met before, but they have no problem letting you know that he's better at it than these guys are. Until after both of them are taken out, we get a second fight. We have been the movie's kind of been hinting at something, but then Yoda arrives, and they do a kind of a force back and forth for a minute, where like Dooku tries to hit him with the lightning, Yoda repels it. He's trying to throw stuff at Yoda from the walls. Yoda shrugs it off. No big deal. And the way Dooku says lightsaber when he says that, like, he's like, clearly we won't win this battle with our knowledge of the Force, but let's see about our skills with a lightsaber. Like, the way he says it is just so specific to me. But and so for the first time, at least on screen, we get to see Yoda with his lightsaber. And this is where the flippy stuff starts. You know, some might say that Yoda is being a little bit of a spot monkey, not stopping to sell anything. But this was so cool to watch at the time. I remember just being like, wait, Yoda's gonna, oh man. And then like Yoda just like, I'm not gonna question why he like walks around with a cane all the time, and then
yes, you are, Andrew. That is my exact question that I want to challenge you on right now.
Backflip.
They play it up so much that he slowly walks into the room. After the fight, he summons his cane with the Force and continues to use it. But clearly, when he has to, this dude can be agile as any of them. Is he?
Do you think this is like a grandpa from a Willy Wonka type situation?
I don't know. Is he using the Force? Is the Force helping move his body?
I would assume,
is it adrenaline?
Yes.
Is it a ruse? Is the old man thing? Is it a prestige situation where being an old decrepit man is part of the ruse to throw off his enemies? Is it I don't know what it is. Is he exhausted afterwards and that's why he needs the cane? I don't know, but
all the above.
There's no answer. I just think it's really fun to see a character that we've
always been portrayed as old, basically. Like,
yes.
Always been portrayed as old. So old that in episode 6, when Luke keeps asking him questions, Yoda's like, you know what? I'm just going to die. Something maybe most parents have some familiarity with. But just seeing this fight was cool. It was something new. It was something completely different. It was something that you definitely wouldn't have been able to do in the original trilogy, which is kind of the whole thing with this. Like, this is something that he definitely couldn't have done before that he now can. And maybe the CG hasn't aged super well, but this is something that I think is just super cool. I mean, you're basically watching...
This kind of justifies the CG Yoda to me. I clearly talked about how much I love the puppet, but like, if it was a puppet the whole movie, then suddenly CG for this fight, it would be weird. I think it's the right move to make him CG the whole time, and it's rare to say something like that, but it's worth it for this short fight alone. Seeing him flip around, it's awesome. So much fun. I think this is around the time that he showed up as a playable character in Soul Calibur. I think it's Soul Calibur 2. Each system, each console got its own bonus character. One of them was Yoda, one of them was Darth Vader, and I think Nintendo got Link. But the idea of Yoda as like a competent lightsaber fighter it's just, gosh, it's fun.
You never saw it coming. I didn't. I remember when they first like came out and they were like, "Yep, this is gonna be, Yoda's gonna be the he's gonna have the fight." And I was like, "There's no way this is gonna happen," but it did, and it is very, very cool.
Oh, this is a great pick, Andrew. I'm wondering if all 3 of your favorite scenes for these first 3 episodes are going to be climactic lightsaber battles. We're 2 for 2 so far. But I can't fault you for it. Like, it is awesome. They're doing a lot of cool stuff with whenever it's Anakin versus Dooku, because we have Anakin versus a Sith apprentice, a bad guy, right? With a red lightsaber. And there's lots of duels, or lots of moments after like the power gets cut and it's low light, and you just see them lit up with their blades, and the camera is rapidly switching between their faces as the light runs across, and you get like Anakin with the red flashing across his face, foreshadowing what's to come. Super cool. Really cool, like editing and storytelling there. Another great lightsaber battle, and it manages... I mean, it's kind of ballsy after how well received episode 1's battle is with Darth Maul to kind of do this again, but it's like, it's different enough that it's not falling to those comparisons. Obviously, we're echoing the end of the second installment of the original trilogy, The Empire Strikes Back, where Luke loses a hand. Now we have Anakin losing an arm. It's like poetry. It rhymes. Pretty cool. I like it, Andrew. It's a good pick. I think I'm going to go with a different scene for my favorite. I'm going to go with a much quieter scene. I think my favorite scene in this movie is Obi-Wan, and forgive me, I'm horrible with Star Wars names, as we've established, especially planet names. I don't know what it's called. When he travels to the planet where they're growing the clone army. I love the entire look of this place. What is it?
Camino.
Camino?
Camino.
Pamino.
K.
Camino. Doesn't matter. I'm going to forget it in 2 minutes. Camino. He travels to this planet that is...
Camino, yes.
yes. Of course, in movies like this, entire planets have one biome. This is an ocean planet. And the look of this place is so awesome. Like, it's always raining outside. He lands on this like storming helipad and enters, and it's all like made of white light and curves. And I love the design of these aliens that are here. Another good use of CG aliens. Like, you probably could do this with puppets, but I think they're getting the most out of being able to use the technology that they're employing here. They remind me a lot, actually, of the aliens at the end of Mission to Mars. Just really tall, really long necks. They just seem peaceful. I like how hard this feels like. I don't know, like a 60s or 70s idea of futuristic sci-fi, like this all white rooms
Logan's
and this
Run
glow.
type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. The egg-like seats that they sit on. So I love the look of this. It stands out so much in this movie. I love Mark Strong Award winners Ewan McGregor's performance here, because they're expecting him, and he's walking this line where he's playing along. He doesn't want to show that he has no idea what they're talking about, but he wants to get out as much information as possible. And they're like, "Do you want to see the clone army?" And he's like, "That's why I'm here." Like, I love the sort of playfulness, but the kind of ruse that he has to upkeep to kind of, again, get as much information out as possible. He comes face to face with Jango Fett, learns that he's the bounty hunter that he's after. It ends with an awesome fight between the two of them, again, out there on the, keep calling it a helipad. Obviously, it's not a helipad. It's a spaceship a pad. What do you call it, Andrew? Where do you land spaceships? Helipads are for helicopters.
I would say a landing pad, but you also take off from it. So,
you know what I'm talking about. That's where they fight. And you get an awesome Jango fight. You get all the classic Jango Boba hallmarks, like the jetpack, shooting those lions out. Again, the gauntlets, the rad helmet, the missiles, the ship that lands on its back. It's all super cool. So, yeah, favorite scene. I love the performance from Ewan McGregor. I love the look of this facility, and I love the fight with Jango Fett.
I think this is a really, really great pick. I really do like this whole mystery that gets uncovered here, this kind of subplot here that just, what is this? He was talking to one of his friends, and his friend kind of gave him the location of Camino, and that's when he goes to like the Jedi archives, and it's missing. We get that whole conversation with Yoda and the younglings where they're kind of, you know, it's... There's a moment where Obi-Wan is explaining everything to Yoda, and even I get to the point of like, why don't you just go there? Like, it's like, you get there before Obi-Wan does, where like, he's like, the planet's not in the archives, but there's everything in the areas, gravity is pulling it towards this location. It's like, well, then there's clearly something there. Like, just go. Like, what are you waiting for?
That's not the Jedi way, Andrew. You gotta run it up the chain.
I understand. You got to run it up the chain. No wonder this whole order gets destroyed. The bureaucracy is ridiculous. That's more correct than not, by the way. But it's.
I mean, that is a strong theme in these movies. Yes.
It is. Anyway, I do like the scene a lot because, like you said, he's expected. It is an interesting revelation that there's this whole army basically sitting in wait. Now you're given the name of a Jedi named Sifo Dyas, who supposedly commissioned this, but then you find out that Jango Fett was commissioned by Darth Tyrannus. So at bare minimum, Sidious and Tyrannus have an aspect of this army being made. Is Camino in on it is kind of the question. I think the Clone Wars establishes that, yes, they were, but the movie just kind of portrays them as like, yeah, we're cloning you an army. What's the big deal? Like they really, like, they treat it like business almost. Like this is just
all about the work. Like, they're like, isn't this fascinating? Yeah. Look at this technology. Look what we're capable of. They almost don't care what it's used for. Like, it's just
right. Like, it's an army. They know what it's going to be used for. They don't care because they're like, we did our bit. You know, is the QC on point? That's all that matters to them. But it's I like it. I do like the scene a lot. Like you said, the look, the very, like, the plain white, the kind of the egg-shaped chair. This is a very, like you said, kind of a classic, you know, older interpretation of what the future would look like, where nothing gets dirty ever. So everything can be white. We eliminated dust, apparently, which is awesome. Rains on this planet a whole lot. I can imagine there's a lot of people who would just love to live in a pod on this planet where it's raining all the time. But
great sleep, best sleep of your life.
Great sleep, best sleep of your life.
Just
You in a pod out looking over big ocean waves, a lot of rain. I'm just saying, I'm falling asleep right now.
There's a moment where Obi-Wan gets knocked off the landing / taking off pad, and he has to sneak back into the facility. And Andrew, he does the thing that all of us has done at the grocery store. He walks up to an automatic sliding door, puts his finger to his temple, and waves his hand to make it open. He literally does the automatic door trick. Just walk 2 steps closer, Obi-Wan. It's gonna open for you, like every other door in this facility. Killed me.
It's great.
There's an ensuing chase afterwards. He tracks Jango Fett's ship, and I love their chase sort of through the asteroid belt, which asteroid belts are a completely sci-fi invention, by the way. They're real life asteroid belts. They're not in that close of proximity, but it looks really cool on screen, so we keep doing it. Dude, the seismic charges that Jango shoots out.
Oh, so cool.
So cool. The way they explode, but there's a delay before you can hear it because it's like breaking the sound barrier. They explode in like this ring of impact, which I don't know if that makes sense in space, but I don't care. It looks really cool. Every time one of those went off, like I was like pumping my fist. I'm like, yeah, that's some cool Star Wars weaponry. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's one of those things where like, does it make any sense? No, not really, but it's cool. So I'm gonna let it. I'm gonna allow it.
Andrew, you mentioned that Obi-Wan learns of this place from one of his friends. Jexter, I think of his name, the guy at the diner.
Jetster.
Okay. Dexter. He runs a diner. Sometimes George Lucas is just so on the nose with his caricatures. Oftentimes it's very problematic. We've talked about that. But the fact that this guy running a diner, he's like a big dude. He's got a grease-stained shirt. He's got it's the mustache that kills me. He's just a weird, crazy-looking alien dude. But he's got like a broom, push broom mustache. I just can't help but, I don't know, admire it, respect it. Just, again, so on the nose that we're taking place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But you know what? You run a diner. This is what you look like.
Yep. Something like that.
You get a fun little Sebulba cameo in the background. Did you catch that? Sebulba walks out. Or maybe it's Sebulba, maybe it's just someone of the same species.
Somebody of his species, yeah.
Right.
But still, very fun. And that is one of the cool things I do like about scenes like this. You get it on the Coruscant scenes, too. They'll just throw these other species into the background. Like in episode 1, they have the Easter egg that one of the pods in the Senate is the aliens from E.T.
I didn't know that.
That's a thing in episode 1. Like one of the points where they pan through the Senate, one of the pods of all the different species is the aliens from E.T. Because if I can't get Spielberg to direct my movie, I'm going to steal his frickin' aliens.
Like there's a shot like in the Senate of E.T. aliens.
Yeah.
Hang on, I'm Googling this. I got to see this.
I'm not lying.
I know you're not lying. There they are. Look at them. It's so blatant. I wonder how... Oh, that's so fun. So canonically, E.T. takes place in the Star Wars universe.
At some point, yes. Obviously much more present. Because E.T.'s not a long time ago. But, yeah. The diner scene is funny, though. Yeah, because it's, like you said, just no subtlety whatsoever.
Andrew, you mentioned, we had talked about the best Star Wars themes earlier. You mentioned those main title themes. Dude, I don't care what movie it is. One of the better Star Wars movies, one of the not better Star Wars movies, whatever quality. When those title cards comes up, they get you pumped every time, man. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I love that even like the modern movies still have the dated looking title card. It's not what a title card would look like this day and age, but they keep that exact look. And that theme hits and just Star Wars blasts across the screen. It's awesome. It's awesome every time.
My brother My brother did confirm that on Disney Plus, apparently the 20th Century Fox Overture is retained on the original Star Wars film.
Good.
He put on episode 4 and said it was there. So
appreciate your contribution, Andrew's brother.
And I like the intro, where we get Obi-Wan and Anakin chasing after an attempted assassin on Queen Amidala, or Senator Amidala.
That is a really fun scene, and again, in my brain, the look of this movie defined the entire trilogy to me. In my brain, this looked so much worse than it actually does. I'm sorry, #PP. But so much of this movie is shot nothing but blue screens, and then like the entire environment is added later. Very popular trend whenever HD cameras are first taken over. You've got your Spy Kids, your Sky Captain, your Sin City, and your Star Wars Episode 2. First off, much less of this movie is done that way than I remembered. Still plenty of it, but it's not every single scene like it was in my brain. And I just remember this scene in particular looking really bad, but some of it's dated, but it's really fun. And it's just a really well planned action chase scene. It totally works for me.
I like it. You get a little bit of like a Blade Runner vibe when they're kind of on the ground. You've got a little bit of the haze, a little bit of the smoke, the neon lights, kind of the seedy bars. I like this a lot. You get some fun action. Obviously, you get like Anakin and Obi-Wan like jumping through the sky, landing on speeders and stuff. You get Anakin using a lightsaber to kill some poisonous worms. Like, seems like overkill, but whatever. It's cool. And they eventually track it down, but that bounty hunter getting killed by Jango is what leads Obi-Wan kind of on his journey that leads him to Kamino and eventually to Geonosis. But it's just a fun, just like you said, just a kind of a chase scene with two Jedi running after a bounty hunter, and it's simple, straightforward, and it's very effective. It's a good way, I think, to open the movie. Just a nice action set piece that we reintroduce all of our lead characters, and then we kick off a bit of a mystery to carry us through.
And during this chase scene, we get these shots of the female assassin they're chasing, and there's times, like literally in my notes, like she's in her little like space pod, and she looks up, and I'm like, did I just see like gills inside of, like, her face looked really weird for a second, and I actually convinced myself I was just seeing things, there was a glare, but it's then revealed this is a changeling character that shapeshifts, and once they die they change to that alien monster. But it's legit like pretty subtle, the little glimpses you get of their actual face during the chase, which I also thought was a pretty fun little touch there.
Yeah, it's just cool information. I think Zam Wessel is the character's name. But did not know that. Just read it off Wikipedia, folks. Don't know why I made it sound like it was a question. But this is just a fun, and like you said, you get the I'm sure if I pay attention at all the people at the bar and things like that, you would see familiar faces and familiar species and stuff. They like to pack those things in.
There's a great character moment between Anakin and Padme when he's assigned to protect her. At first it's Obi-Wan and Anakin, but then Obi-Wan chases after the bounty hunter, so it's just Anakin protecting her, escorting her back to Naboo. And once they arrive, she makes the plan that they're going to go out to the secluded beach house, basically, and he tries to speak up. He's like, "Oh, excuse me, I'm in charge of security." And she puts her foot down. She's like, "Well, we're here because I know this planet. You should use this knowledge to your advantage. This is what we're going to do." And like puts him in his place. And it's a great character moment for both of them. You can see like his struggle with like taking orders. And it sets a great dynamic between the two of them where she is becoming pretty much the only person that is going to be able to get through to him, that he's going to listen to, that he respects. He's pushing back more and more against Obi-Wan, believes Obi-Wan is jealous, but Padme has a connection with him that, as we go along, is basically going to be like his last link to anything good inside of him. But all that's kind of represented here in this little moment where she is like, I I'm in charge here, really. And she continues to do so where, he's got to stay with her, but she decides like they're going to go together to try to save his mom or go rescue Obi-Wan. It's like, well, you've got to stay with me. This is what I want to do. Then this is what we both have to do. Like she's bending and breaking the rules with him to do what's right. And she pretty much takes the lead on all the missions that they're on.
Yeah. And at this point, she gets to get in on the action too. That's the cool part. Like for a lot of this, she's being protected by Anakin, obviously, while their romance kind of unfolds. And then it's when they get to Tatooine that kind of she starts taking charge. And during a lot of these big climatic battles, she's in the thick of it. She's got blasters. She's doing cool stuff. Not to say that she can get in on the action in the last film. Obviously, when they were breaking back into the Capitol, things like that, she had a gun. She was shooting people. She was doing her part. So that's another thing I like about this character. She's jumping up. She's not content to just sit back. She's not content to let, just be the damsel in distress. She wants to get in on the action, shoot some droids, and have a good time, which I think that's all any of us want, really.
In episode 1, we made it a point to highlight Pernilla August as Shmi Skywalker in her goodbye with Anakin as a very touching and effective emotional scene in that movie. She does it again here with Hayden Christensen. He goes to rescue her, and she dies in his arms. And man, it's effective. Just a boy crying out for his mom, begging her to stay with him. It totally works. So you got to give it up, of course, once again to Pernilla August for pulling that off, Hayden Christensen for being the scene partner, and then when he does what he does next, you can't help but sit back and be like, well, I kind of get it. These are the people responsible for killing his mom. In a fit of rage, he's going to retaliate. And this is such a key scene for the character, of course, because he recognizes... I think this is really how he recognizes like the rage inside of him. Like he confesses to Padme what he did. He didn't spare anyone, regardless of if they were directly responsible for what happened to his mom or not. He doesn't exactly regret it, but he recognizes that it's wrong. He just he's just recognizing this thing that's inside of him without really knowing how to feel about it, I think.
Yep. I think this is great, because this is another part of the character I'm kind of talking about, is he's basically dealing with a lot of stuff that he just doesn't know what to do with, which again is something that I'm sure none of us are familiar with, and we don't know how to handle that either. But this is another moment. This is another moment where we get some more introduction here. We go to Tatooine. We get introduced to Klieg Lars. We get introduced to his son, Owen Lars, and his girlfriend, Beru, who will eventually become very important characters. Some very... No, I can't do it. I was going to make a joke about them getting barbecued, but I can't do it. But I can't do it, not in good faith. But it is a... So we're getting a bit more world building there. We're back on Tatooine, so we're meeting a lot of these people. We're at the moisture farm, things like that. It's and then obviously the thing with the Tusken Raiders, we eventually get Anakin's breakdown where, he says, I killed all of them, not the women, the children. I slaughtered them like animals, because they are animals, basically. And
the Imperial March is playing subtly in the themes. Nice.
Swelling up in the background. It's very nice, very well done. It's the same reaction I have when I kill a bunch of people in Fortnite.
What have I done?
I can only assume that these are women and children as well that I'm killing in Fortnite, but thankfully Fortnite is not real. But it's I was literally playing last night, and we killed me and my friend killed like 8 people, and I was like, I slaughtered them like animals. Just because that line was in my head, and I was like, oh god, what has happened? But otherwise, no. The departure scene from Shmi is another one where it just hits. It works. Here's a woman that's been through so much, and he's just too late. Like, if he'd literally been there a day before, he could have saved her. Maybe even hours before, he could have saved her, but it was just too late. And it's, again, that idea of being able to protect that he loves, all of that he thinks the Jedi don't provide him, that makes him start turning to the dark side. And it's good stuff.
we haven't talked about probably the two biggest action scenes of this movie. There's a big action scene in the droid building facility, and then there's a huge action scene fighting some beasts in a coliseum like setting. There's a lot of great moments we can talk about. It's a lot of fun, but I want to zero in on probably my favorite Ewan McGregor line reading in the entire film. He's been held captive of this planet. He sends a distress signal. Padme and Anakin go to rescue him, and they get captured. And then they're getting chained up right alongside Obi-Wan. And Anakin tells Obi-Wan, "I retransmitted the signal just as you requested, Master. Then we decided to come and rescue you." And Ewan goes, "Good job!"
Oh man, I feel like there's a line. There's a line in almost every movie where Obi-Wan gets to be super sassy. I know there's one in part 3. I'll save it to talk about there, but I feel like there's some similar lines in part 1 where just the sass gets to come out. It's always Obi-Wan is great for that.
It's the Jedi trainer way. Yoda's a sassy little bitch in episode 4 or episode 5. I feel like this fight against the beast is sort of this movie's pod race scene, in the sense that it's the big action scene before the final action scene. But through most of that opening or early scenes of the fight against the beast, there's no music. You're just hearing the dirt and the animals and the snarls. And then once the action ramps up, the music kicks in, very similar to the pod race scene before. But hashtag PPE is certainly some moments of aged CG. Anytime they're riding on top of those animals, it can look a little rough. Almost like Jason the Argonauts level of kind of shakiness, but definitely a lot of cool character moments throughout.
As far as being stop motion, but yeah, the kind of gladiator scene, I guess it is, is super cool. I like it. It's a good fight. Obviously, this descends into the droids versus the Jedi. The Jedi arrive. This is where Mace Windu gets to get in on the action, shoot things up, have a good time. And or slice things up, have a good time, and yeah, I will never be sad about seeing sassy Obi-Wan. He's what all things need.
Andrew, I guess I can outright say it, even though we've maybe danced around it. In my brain, in my memory, this was the low point of the prequel trilogy. It's the one I was dreading revisiting the most. It really had some very negative connotations in my brain. Maybe I'll do a ranking at the end of this thing. I haven't rewatched episode 3 yet, but I don't know if it's gonna no longer be the bottom of my rankings of the prequel trilogy or whatever. But my point is, I still found plenty to like here, handily. Certainly some fun action scenes. In my mind, like the CG of it all really dominated, and that's really not fair. Like, okay, those monsters are CG. You might not love the way they look, but the action scene still plays out in a fun way. That chase scene is still a blast. Like, there's still competent filmmaking happening here. Much has been said about the performances and the budding romance, but there's still fun dialogue to be had. Like, I think from a plot standpoint, I really like the slow burn of Anakin Skywalker. He is not evil outright by the end of this movie. Like, they're still just planting seeds now 2 movies in. He's not rushing to get to the Darth Vader stuff, which I think is a smart way to do it, because once you get there, where do you go after that? He is still very much Obi-Wan's apprentice by the end of this, despite having some qualms, whatever. So I found plenty to like, which I thought would have been much more of a struggle. I still had a good time here, and I am primed. I am ready to dive into episode 3 next week.
You and me both.
It feels like we're coming to the end of prequel month, because we've got one more, prequel trilogy movie left. But of course, we're not stopping there. We're also covering Solo, a Star Wars story. So we're just halfway through the month, Andrew. Many more Star Wars ahead. You enjoying your time in this franchise, Andrew?
it is fun to go back to these. Like I said, episode 1 especially was just it was a phenomenon. Like, people don't think about it now, but like, it was a big deal when it came out. More Star Wars, and now Star Wars is kind of like, people are
Non-stop.
a little. Yeah, I mean, we've got Star Wars coming. There's more Star Wars stuff coming. I don't know what's next in the franchise, but I know they just announced, when we're recording this, they just announced a new trilogy of films written by Simon Kinberg, and I don't know how that man, hashtag PP. Okay, but you've got your films, so we've obviously got the 9 films. We have the additional films that they've made, Rogue One and Solo. We've got the Mandalorian and Grogu film coming out in 2026. I mean, there's plenty more to come. But there's also all the television. That's the big one now. So we've got all these different live action series now that are going on. We have The Mandalorian. We have Andor. We have Ahsoka. Those are all on and still actively airing episodes. I mean, there's more Star Wars than ever, really, at the end of the day. It is pretty wild to have this much content coming out.
Well, I look forward to continuing to discuss this franchise, of course, Andrew. But for now, it's time for our question of the week. And if you want to leave us a question for a future episode, you can do exactly that by hopping into our Discord server. There's a link in the show notes. If you have not joined us already, go ahead and do so. We'll be here. Leave us a question just like Mike Lynch has done. And here's what they say. Listening to the Heavyweights episode, and while I've never seen it, it holds a tiny place in my life because it was one of the many movies I've seen duped from a rental VHS tape. I can still see the name written on the label above other 90s films. It made me realize I've been witness to this low-key suburban thievery for decades, from VHS dupes holding 3 movies, horrible DVD transfers of movie screens, and Wii's modded to hold every NES and Sega game in creation. I still have my father-in-law's VHS copy of the original Star Wars cuts as a prized possession. Do you guys have memories of stacks of stolen movies in a friend's or family's home? Do you still have any that you've kept? Absolutely love this question. Legally, my official answer is no. I have no idea what you're talking about, Mike Lynch.
Yeah, the same. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next week. No, but
no, this is a staple. Physical media thievery. I guess that's the thing of the past now, right? Like, I don't want to be like, kids have no idea. Like, there's certainly torrents and downloads. I mean, it's easier than ever,
Sure.
Really. But physically duplicating something and watching a horrible copy of it, that might now be a thing of the past. But I know exactly where Mike Lynch is coming from here.
Yeah, and like I've mentioned the Williams Family Vault before on this show, which was dozens of tapes, if not hundreds, that had stuff recorded off television, off HBO, off any number of things. We used to have a book. It was a binder. Every tape was numbered, and it told you what was on the tape, and it had. So you'd need to you'd pick the tape, and you'd want to watch Batman Returns, but it was second on the tape, so you'd need to fast forward through the first thing that was on the tape, and it was faster if you fast forwarded not watching the tape than if you were watching it. So you had to be careful because you didn't want to burn the tape out or anything. So hang
on. You had a binder to track what movies on what tape and what the time codes were to start each movie?
Not the time codes. It didn't have the time codes.
Okay.
It just had what movies were on what tape. You had to figure that out for yourself. So if you put it in,
so they weren't written on the label,
movie,
on the tape label.
They were written, but if there were 3 movies on there, you'd have to fast forward through the first one, and you have to figure that out. There wasn't any time coding on my VHS to tell me.
I'm just trying to figure out
exactly
where the binder comes in. Can't you just write on the label?
The binder
of the
tells
VHS
you what's
tape?
on what's tape.
Why not put that on the tape?
If there's dozens and dozens of tapes, you gotta narrow it down somehow, man. You can't just dig it through everything every time. It's not like everything on the tapes was in order.
I understand now. So the binder just organized where to find. Okay, I got you.
It told you what was on what tape because you didn't, like I said, Batman.
So you don't have to look at each individual tape. You can just look at this binder.
Or, Batman Returns could be on tape 79. I'm not gonna dig through 79 tapes looking for one movie, man. What am I, an animal? But So we had a whole binder of them. I don't think many of those still exist. We used to have a bunch of Christmas specials tape. Like I remember like going to tapes and like there'd be whole tapes that were just Christmas movies. And so I'd like put in a tape and I could just let that run. There's one in particular I remember because I don't know what franchise it's from. I have no idea what else exists of this franchise, but it was called A Merry Mirthworm Christmas. And it was about these weird little worm things drawn in a way that made them not look repulsing. But, like, I don't know what a merry mirthworm is. I don't know what a mirthworm is. I don't know what this franchise is. But I know we had a Christmas special for it. And so, so it's a lot of weird stuff like that. Like I said, I don't think any of these tapes still exist. I'm about to travel down to my parents' house. I will take a look. But I know they kept some of their tapes, just like their regular VHS tapes. But I do not think anything of the vault survived. But yeah, I have personal experience with this. Just, you'd see something. I do that thing where I recorded something off TV and I try to really dial in and edit out the commercials. Like I'd be like,
Man.
I'd like pause it when it would go to commercial and then I'd unpause it when it came back from commercial. I would do that. And sometimes you just had commercials. There's a whole vibe for like, I found it was a tape of, there's this guy that I follow. I see him on TikTok sometime, but all he has basically is just hundreds of tapes, just the blank VHS tapes, and sometimes they're not even labeled as to what they are. He gets them everywhere. Like he buys them from storage units, he buys them from everywhere, and he'll be like, the tape won't be labeled, and then he'll find out that it's like the NBC broadcast of Star Wars from 1981 or something. Like it's just unbelievable this random stuff he finds. But I go on YouTube sometimes and I'll look for like a Christmas special that I watched as a kid, and someone's uploaded it. They're like, this is the May 1990, or this is the November 1991 broadcast on CBS of this special, and it's got all the commercials included, and I'm watching certain commercials and they're
nice
unlocking
blanket.
That's unlocking so many memories. Like there's these 7-Up Christmas, there's the 7-Up Christmas commercial that just lives in my brain. I remember it so vividly. I don't know why. Anytime I see it, it just makes me feel happier and more comfortable. And yeah, it turns out that, the duping of, is that what we're calling it? I guess duplicating, but it was a thing. I mean, that was a VHS could do it. Like it didn't even feel illegal. Like
I know
it's just yours.
It is.
Like it's a weird thing.
Sports for sure. This is a broadcast.
Yeah,
of the National
like you're not allowed to
Football League.
you're not rebroadcasting it. You're just rewatching it. Like I guess, but it does say no unauthorized duplication. I guess it does say that.
I gotta imagine it's illegal, but like you said, like. You're selling VHSs with a record button. You're selling me blank tapes. What do you think I'm doing? Like, come on.
Right. Like, well, you would run it, like, and it wouldn't work on certain things, but, like, yeah, I just, people recorded stuff off TV. That was definitely a thing. You think about all the people that, like, record television shows. Back when that was the thing you had to do. Like, if you weren't able to watch it, you'd set the VCR to record. And you'd tell it to start a few minutes early and go a few minutes late.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like it can't,
how much of this was
especially
was
television's the big thing I think it applies to, just because for so long with television there was no way to rewatch it. There was no way to go back to it. Like wrestling. God, the tape trading in wrestling, like unbelievable. There was a whole scene in wrestling that was just tape trading. You'd get a tape from somebody, you'd duplicate it for yourself, you'd pass it back on. Like it was a thing. It was what you did. So I reject that you're telling me I'm being a thief. There's other reasons I'm probably being a thief, but not this.
I remember VHS recordings for sure. My older brother was really into it. I remember he had Face Off recorded, and that's probably the one we watched the most. As a family, we did not have a vault. We were not as hardcore as the Williamses. But what I do remember is in the early 2000s, my dad buying lots of bootleg DVDs. I think he had like a coworker that would burn them. He'd get copies off the internet, burn copies, and sell them for $5 or whatever. My dad would we had a binder, like a Case Logic CD binder of nothing but illegal burned DVDs. Now this was definitely illegal, what was happening here. But I just remember watching lots of crappy versions of new movies. Like, this isn't even out yet. This just came out. And look, I've got it on DVD. I mentioned Sky Captain earlier. This is how I watched Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow for the first time, was on a burned DVD. I remember the movie SWAT, that Colin Farrell movie, watching that on a burned DVD. And again, just the worst quality. Like, I know it was popular to like sneak a camera into movie theaters and point at the screen. We didn't have anything that bad, but just by nature of it being an early 2000s internet download, like, it's getting compressed to hell. Colors are horrible. But we had a lot of illegal DVDs for sure. My dad was super into that.
I went to New York City in April of 2002, and I bought a bunch of, they had new movies that were on VHS, and I bought a couple of them, and they were all cameras. They were all video cameras inside a movie theater. They were like $5, and I was like, why not? What's the worst that could happen? And one of them, the guy had the lens cap on for like the first 10 minutes. So I was like, well, that's awesome. No quality control whatsoever. Definitely. Those ones are definitely not legal. I understand that.
Thank you for the question, Mike Lynch. And we, of course, want to hear from all of you. Join us in the Discord server, Question of the Week discussion channel. Let us know your memories, your thoughts of the illegal, maybe not illegal, duplicating a film, recording a VHS, burned DVDs. What you got? What are your stories from this now bygone era? Let us know in that Discord, and of course, come back next week as we break down Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And until then, just remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony, and thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.